now.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is David Sirota. I'm a director on the Batty team, overcoming objections at the interview. And so let's just back up a little bit and talk about the full service checkout. Because when we do a full service checkout, sometimes we get really excited when someone says, "Oh yes, I'm interested in signing on. I'm interested in doing this." And the purpose of the full service checkout is to find out who is interested and then set up a time to meet with them for the interview. So this is not about what to say at the full service checkout, because if you have 12 people waiting to check out business, you're not going to spend half an hour explaining to them what's going on. Why are people disappearing as I'm talking? Anyway, so we back up to that, and again, the full service checkout is, are you interested in finding out more? And we've already covered the interview aspect of this, have we not? But tonight, we're going to talk about overcoming objections at the interview, because very rarely do you find someone who sits down across from you and they say, "Just shut up, I want to sign on." I mean, usually we need to talk to them. We usually need to find out they're going to have hesitations. Different than when you're talking to somebody about booking, and have pretty much the same hesitations from one host to the next. It's time, it's number of people, it's the size of their house, and you'll also find that when you're talking to people about starting their own business, that they will have you'll hear pretty much the same hesitations. They're not necessarily objections at this point, because they've already agreed to sit down to listen to find out more. Just the fact that they're there is a really good indication that it's something they would like to do. They're just not sure how they can accomplish it. Does that make sense? So one of the first things, and this is from Karen, just right off the bat, just say, you're sitting here now, we're having this great talk. Let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no, never, I don't even know why I'm meeting with you, and 10, can I have my grand opening tomorrow? Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of starting your business? That's a great indication of where to start and how to start. If someone's a 9, it really means they're a 10. They just don't want to say 10. I mean, it's rare that you're going to find a 9 who says no. but you have 6s and 7s and 8s. And a lot of times people are very cautious because it is sort of an unknown. Then it's very simple. They ask you, what is it that makes you a 6? And then they will tell you, they will voice what their hesitation is. And again, in this situation, it's a hesitation. It's not really an objection. And don't forget that you've already talked to them. You've already gotten to know them. We're already in the interview process. So as you're coming up with, as you're listening to what they say, you're also, in your mind, tailoring your response to their personality, who they are, what you already know about them. This is not just a stranger sitting there. This is somebody you've already, been having a conversation with. So it's very easy to say, this is what to say, this is what to say. But, for certain personality types, you have to tailor it a little bit. And also, I want to say right now, don't forget, just like overcoming hesitations about having a party, we don't always have all the answers right away. And that's when your director comes in handy. I had the interview, and again, you can always go back to your director. Nothing says that in that time of the interview, that this is the only time you will get to talk to them. You can't go back. You can't say anything else. So don't forget that, you're going to hear things. We still hear things that sometimes it's just like, wow, I really don't know what to say to that. So I get on the phone. I call Karen. I call Michelle. Somebody said this. I didn't know what to say. They helped me out, and I call the person back. A great model to use in this situation is called the CARE model. And I'll go over quickly what the letters stand for. C stands for clarify. A stands for acknowledge. R stands for respond. And E stands. So you're sitting there and you're talking to somebody and they say, I'd let you know, this really sounds great, but I really don't think I have enough time. And that was one of the, on Facebook, I have all of the things that you came up with, and we're going to brainstorm some of those, and we're going to talk about how to overcome the hesitations that you guys posted on Facebook. And the first thing you want to do is clarify. And so you just repeat what they said right back. So what you're telling me is that you really feel with your schedule the way it is right now that you don't see how you could have the time to do this. And then they'll probably say, yeah, exactly. Then you acknowledge what they're saying. And one of the best things to say is, you know, I hear from a lot of people. I hear that from a lot of people, that they're just not sure with their schedules that they'd be able to do that. That you can then respond to what they're saying. And this is where you sort of overcome the hesitation. You know, if we looked at your calendar right now, if you could show me what your calendar looked like together to see where you could carve out time to do parties and maybe carve out a few minutes a day to be able to work your business, would you still want to hear more about this? And would you be willing to work with me so that we can achieve that and see how we can get this to work for you? Because these people are there because they want this to work for them. So we're trying to facilitate this for them. So you're responding with can we work together on this? And then you sit down and you look at the calendar and say, well, you know, you've got this here and you've got that there. Your Saturday is wide open. Did you ever think that maybe you could do 2 parties in one day? You know, is there anything that's preventing you from maybe doing a brunch party and an evening party and still have a little time in the afternoon for yourself to do what needs to get done? And then they'll say something like, oh, I can do that? Because people don't realize that they can do anything they want as long as it's legal. They can do parties at 3 in the morning if they want. I mean, they can do it whenever they want. But then again, it's up to us to show them that there are ways to do this. And then we re-invite them. So now that we know that it looks like something that we can work out and the schedule might work for you, what do you say? Do you want to give it a try? And remember, we're always talking about giving it a try. For some reason, I mean, all of you think back to that weighty commitment that you made to Pampered Chef, this, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Oh, if I say yes, how am I going to give this 100%? And what's known now that after we've done this for a little bit, we see that it really is a try. It really is not a lot of hours of commitment, but people sitting at the interview still don't realize that yet. So people are still very hesitant to say yes. And so it's really important to keep using the word try and not commitment and not, you know, words like that. We want to make it as palatable as possible. Yes, Karen. I
was going to say
Karen?
One thing that I like to say that makes it super easy for people to just transition right into the steps of getting started is, so, you know, now that we found a way that it actually could fit into your schedule, would you like to hear about how to get started if you decided to give this a try? And very often they'll say, yeah, I'd like to hear about those steps. So you talk to them about scheduling a grand opening show, you take out your calendar, all of a sudden they're picking out a date and you're done. Because sometimes just saying yes is just too much for people. So you can skip right over that.
That's right. And also, you can always go back to the 1 to 10. Now that you know the scale of 1 to where you are now, and anything a 7 or above is a 10. Some people are just more cautious than others. And don't forget, this is really important, especially with a fledgling business and building a team. It is still a numbers game. That not everyone who says yes will end up signing. that things happen. I had this run for a while of everybody who was going to join my team suddenly found full-time jobs. It had nothing to do with Pampered Chef. It had nothing to do with me. It was they had been interviewing, they got full-time jobs. And so just remember that in the beginning, every interview seems so important, and every person we talk to is so important, but even when they're excited about it. So just remember that. The great news is everybody could say yes. Anybody could say yes, but it's still a numbers game. So with that being said, with just that simple CARE model, we look at some of the hesitations that you guys came up with. I'd love to join the business, but I just don't have the time. So now what would you guys say to that? I sort of gave it to you, but you know, do you feel now that you would have sort of a guideline, sort of a roadmap for what to do when people have a hesitation? Let me ask you that. Did that little bit help?
Definitely.
Okay, good. So we already sort of talked about time, and sometimes it's I don't have time at night to do parties. So, or you tell me, what do you guys hear when someone says I don't have time? What specifically do they mean? And what else?
Well, my guess is that when people say
I think for me, it was people.
Go ahead, Emily.
Wait, someone was saying something.
Oh, I was going to say, for me, it's people are looking at their immediate future and not further down the line and say like, oh, I've got this, 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 and this. So it's almost like they don't think beyond what's going on right now for them.
Right. And, you know, not everybody who says they want to sign is going to sign right then and there. Sometimes they do have, like kids in soccer or on an all-star team where they have this cluster of words fail me. Anyway, where they have a lot of commitments, practices. That's the word, practices. All of a sudden, you know, we hear about people when we talk about parties. Oh, I couldn't have. You could. It's 2 weeks away, and that happens also with this. We still, you know, again, what would a clarifying question be if someone says, I don't have time or I'm really busy right now? What would a good thing to ask, do you think, would be?
What do you have going on?
Yep, what do you have going on? And what else? So they tell you, my kid's on the all-star team, and then we've got games every weekend. And
when do you have time?
Yeah.
When do you have time?
What would be
right.
When would be a better time?
Yep.
Right. So when do the practices end? When is the season over? Things like that. And then you can take it from there. Another thing about time, I think, is that people feel they don't have time to, and it's the same thing with the business. You know, people have 3 to 4 hour blocks of time, either in an evening, take a lot of time. I feel like you're so busy every day, maybe 15-minute or 20-minute chunks at a time, things like that. Does that help? Okay, I'm seeing some heads do this. Are there any other questions about hierarchy? Are there any other questions about time?
This was all freezing up, so he came over to see if he could.
Have I gone deaf? Have I suddenly gone deaf?
No, I couldn't hear a whole lot of what was happening the last minute or two. Everything just
Oh, okay.
up.
Okay.
So I don't know if you covered it, but when it comes to the time thing, you know, sometimes I'll ask, you know, under the clarification part, you know, say before you make your decision final that you don't have enough time, can I ask you how much time you think this takes?
Right. Right.
And so you might have covered that. I don't know. Everything just froze up. For
Sort of. Not in those words, but sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. And
You
then
know,
say if I,
showing them where they could carve out a few minutes every day just to work their business, where it's not having to sit down for an hour or 2 hours at a time. Yeah.
Right. And to say, you know what, if you can put in about 4 to 5 hours a week, it could mean an extra $500 to $600 a month for you. If you could carve out about 8 to 10 hours a week, it could mean $1,000 a month.
Right. And the other thing, again, in the interview process, we've already determined what their needs are and what their goals are for their business. And that gives us a good indication of how much time every week they will need to put in. But 2 parties minimum. It's a great way to start. So it's 8 to 10 hours a week. And people are usually very surprised at how little time it can take to get going. I do talk to people in the beginning about the learning curve also. It may take a little longer in the beginning because you're trying to learn the website. You're trying, you know, there's trainings and all that. But for the most part, when you're up and running and past that learning curve, it's about 8 to 10 hours a week. Mm-hmm. Okay, one of the other objections was there's a fear of too many consultants working in a small area. Has anyone heard that?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
Who said absolutely? Hi, Erin.
I think that happens. And my struggle is I find people who want to do it, but it's the time thing. And it's the same thing, the schedules. And I'm doing everything. Michelle's awesome. She says, you know, talk to these people and let them know. People who are waiting for summer, their kids are in school. This is the best time to do it. You still can't get them to budge. And then they come up with that if there's too many people in the area. And even in my area, there's not very many of us in the area, but it still is a concern for them.
And one of the great, and I got this from Karen, that there are 65,000 Pampered Chef consultants in the United States. However, any direct sales company with fewer than 100,000 consultants is considered startup, even though I've been doing this for 35 years. And that's a great statistic to throw out there. It's a great statistic that at one point Mary Kay was signing on every month as many consultants as Pampered Chef has.
Mm-hmm. Each month.
Yes. So just that little bit of information sort of puts it in perspective. And I always say, you know, I have a consultant who lives next door to me. Rick lives in Manchester. Michelle lives in Manchester. But we rarely cross paths. There may be somebody at a party who's been to one of my parties that Rick is doing a party or something like that, but rarely. And I explain this to people: you're going to be starting out with your family and friends, not their family and friends. Mm-hmm. And it takes you in a whole different direction. Also, the thing about the I want to wait till summer.
No.
the one of the best things I think is if we can put some time in now, this is a great time for the learning curve, so that when the summer comes, you'll be up and running and you won't have to spend the first 2 months of summer just getting your training and your and practice in. That this would be a great time to practice so that when your summer job happens, you'll be trained and ready to go.
Yeah, that's good too.
Does that help?
Yep.
Good.
That is helpful.
And to the one, to speak to there's a lot of consultants in my area. Again, I'm big on the clarification part before I jump in with solutions.
Okay.
So I say something like, so tell me more about that. Do you know a lot of consultants in your area? And very often, they know too.
Right.
That's it. And I say, okay, do you know any others? And they say, no, that's it too. And and I say, okay, how many people do you know work in a school? How many people do you know that work in a coffee shop? I live in not a very big town, and there's about 18,000 people here. If 9,000 of them are adults who eat, and I'm doing 2 shows a week, it's going to take me 4 years to see everybody. And most people, when they go to one party, they want to go to a few of them to get everything they want. And that's if I never leave Goffstown. It's going to take me 4 years to see everybody once. And really, most consultants do this alongside a full-time job and parenthood. But most consultants aren't out doing 5 parties a week. You know,
That's excellent.
yeah. So then I say to them, but it sounds to me like you might really be concerned about where you're going to find bookings. And they go, yeah. And I go, aha. So that's why it's really important to clarify so that you're not just talking at them, but you're really finding out what's the real hesitation and addressing that. Because
I do find that a lot too, Karen. Yep.
Yeah.
You're right there. That's a big one because they'll say, I've got my first couple of parties, that's fine, but then where do the parties come from after
Where
that?
do we go from there?
And
And
tell
so,
them, you'll be surprised because every time you're at a party, these people are wonderful.
your host is going to fill the
But-
room with your next group of people, next group of customers, hosts, and everything else. So, but a lot of times what they say is the hesitation isn't the real hesitation. And that's why that clarification is
Right.
important.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, and same with the time thing. You know, is it right now is particularly busy, or just in life because you have a full-time job and you have kids? And then would you be surprised to hear that probably 75% of the consultants on our team have a full-time job and kids? So, you know, we can talk a little bit more about, you know, different options for family.
And I also, when people say something about, you know, well, I know there are 2 consultants in the town where I live, and I say, and how many pizzerias?
Yeah.
That's good.
Tell me how many pizzerias are in your town, and how many Asian food, you know. If you were going to open your own restaurant, would you not do it because there was another one in town?
Those
And
are
it
good
sort of
advice.
it sort of just brings, it's always, this is something Karen taught me very well. It's always really great to bring it back to something very tangible and everyday, something everybody recognizes. An analogy that just, you know, just a really relatable analogy. And for me, it's like, how many pizzerias are there? Because everybody has a pizzeria they go to, and there's a favorite one in town, and there's the one in town they don't like. And the one in town that they don't like is somebody else's favorite. So, so does that help with the number of consultants? And yes?
Yeah, that's good. I like
Okay.
Yes. You know what? I think a lot of these objections obviously are linked to a fear of failure.
Excellent. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It's, you know, it's what it all comes back to is they're passionate about Pampered Chef. They love the product. They want to sell it. They want to be great at it. And they're so afraid they're going to fall on their faces.
And that's why the word try is really important, because it sort of helps. Everybody has their own idea of what they're committing to, but I still think that by using the word try, it can somehow lessen that fear of failure. And, you know, I don't know if you guys talked about this, but Karen, would you like to tell them the worst case scenario if someone starts? And have you talked about that at all?
I don't think so yet.
If someone's afraid of failure, this is what Karen says.
I say something like, okay, so let's say, you know, we worked together and we got your initial parties in place. And let's say that your fear comes true, that you don't get any bookings. So what happens? So they say, so I sign up and I do those parties and then I don't get any bookings. And then what? Then I don't have a business after that. And then what? And they say, then I don't know. I guess I stop. Okay, so you stop. What do you have? Well, you've got all those products in the kit. You've got all the cash in your pocket. You redeem your PC dollars. But guess what? We're going to be talking after every party. If you go 4 parties in a row without any bookings, you'll be the first person on my team to do that if you're talking with me, you know. And but, you know, then I say, so, you know, it's $600 worth of products in the kit. You probably make an average of $100 per party, and we're going to get you at least 4 lined up. So it's at least $400 in your pocket, and another your sign-on bonus or what, and you know, an extra 100 PC dollars. So what's the worst case scenario if you don't sign? And then they go, well, I wouldn't have any of them. And I say, and you'd still be wondering, gee, I wonder if that Pampered Chef thing could have worked, you know? So yeah, worst case scenario, you know, you give it a try and you end up with a kitchen full of Pampered Chef products and a pocket full of cash.
What do we figure out? It's about $1,200 worth of cash and prizes?
Usually. As a consolation prize.
Yes, consolation prize. So yeah, and that was an excellent point. All of these hesitations, all comes down to being afraid of failing.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, you really hit the nail on the head. And,
yeah, thank you.
And so that clarification is really important. And what I try to do when they have a hesitation that's clearly a fear of failure kind of thing, I try to kind of put it on me and say, you don't have to know where you're going to find all those bookings. You know, I'm going to help you get those initial parties in place. And then there's going to be training involved. We're not going to sign you up, pat you on the back, and wish you good luck. Say, hope those shows work for you. We're going to do it together. And, you know, and we're going to train you on that. So really, so that they don't think it's all on them and their failure. And, you know, because sometimes they say, oh, I just don't know where I'd get bookings. And I say, well, of course, you haven't had any training yet. Of course you have no idea where you're going to find bookings. But I have every idea in the world, and we're going to.
That's right.
So.
Any other questions about that? Any other comment? What about I can't talk in front of people? Raise your hand if you felt that way before you started.
I still feel that way.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I'm the only one with my hand down.
My hand's down.
So you guys are the best ones to overcome this objection. If you were afraid to talk in front of people, what was it that made it so that I also like to ask people what they do for a living. You know, you already know what they do for a living. And a lot of times, you know, someone will say, I'm a teacher. Really? Or I'm a waiter. I'm a server. Well, this is just like a party of 8. It's like a table of 8.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's really important to know what they do for a living, because a lot of times they don't even realize that what they already know how to do is very translatable and transferable to this. But let's say you have someone who's never worked before and it's time, you know, they just need to go out and work. What do you think you would say to somebody who said, I'm really afraid to talk in front of people? What did Mel write?
I know for me, one of my biggest things that I try to tell everyone is I had never even been to a Pampered Chef show. I never went to one of my director's shows. I'd never been to a show before in my life. So when Lori came to me and said, you should do this, and then we talked about setting up stuffed animals and doing it at the table, I didn't even do that. I went out cold turkey and just did my first show. So for me, when people say that, that's my big thing, is that, you know, they say they can't talk in front of people, or I'd never even had gone to a Pampered Chef. I'd never been to any shows at home before. So I tried that. It hasn't worked super well yet.
Well, also a good clarifying question would be, is it that you're afraid to talk in front of people, or you don't know what you would say in front of people? Because again, that's a completely different, I can give you every single word to come out of your mouth. You'll never have to think of anything on your own if you don't want to. But a lot of times it's that fear of, what would I say? How do I do this? What do I do? And that again comes back to training. And do you all have Karen's point system that you use the outline for your parties? Is that all yes? And because I always wave that around
No.
at parties, because that's a lot of times. Who said no?
Emily. I'm
Oh, okay.
under Sue's team. So
Oh, okay.
I don't have it either.
We have a very,
Wow.
you gonna post it, Karen?
I can post that. Yeah, it's the
Okay.
entire outline. They don't have to know anything.
Right. And so I always say, you know, especially if I hear this at a party, you know, the Q&A, you know, afraid to talk in front of people. And I just hold up the piece of paper and I said, you get one of these. You get one of these. It has, and I literally do this. It has everything on it. Thank your host. Thank your host for inviting you. Tell your story. And I hold it up and I say, it's all right here. You don't have to know what to say. But again, that comes back to training. And once people realize the awesome training that we have, and that we're not going to just, like Karen said, sign them up and wish them well, but we're going to really help them hone their skills and know what they're doing. A lot of times that will. And I also say, how many jobs have you had? And they'll say 2 or 3. And it's like, were you nervous on your first day? Were you a little anxious? And they go, oh, I was terrified. And I said, this is just another first day at work. That's all it is. And on your second and third and fourth days, all of a sudden you're going to feel a whole lot better because you're going to know what you're doing. None of us knows what we're doing when we walk into that first party. But I always bring it back to how many first days of work have you had? And what did you feel like? What was your first day as a teacher like? And it's, again, a very relatable question that brings it back to something very tangible and relatable.
I tend to be very shy.
Uh-huh.
So when someone comes to me with that hesitation, I'll say to them, if I was a guest at this party, I would be sitting at the back on the couch being very quiet. And I'll say, but as a consultant, I know my role. I know my job. I know what's expected of me. So because I have a role and I know what's expected, I'm okay. I'm not afraid because you know what I'm supposed to do and I know what I'm supposed to do. I have the training. But if you put me in this party as a guest, I would be a completely different person. And they all just kind of go, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is my job.
Yeah.
They trained me how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have to talk to you as a consultant. As a guest, I can sit in the back and not talk to anybody.
People are very surprised when I tell them I used to be very, very shy and quiet. And they're like, you? And I tell them it's the number one fear that people have in a business is talking in front of people. But I tell them, we're going to give you the outline. Again, what you asked, David, is perfect. Is it that you're really nervous about talking in front of people or you don't know what to say? And I say, because we're going to give you the words to say. And remember, you're starting your family and your friends.
Yes.
And by the time you've gone through that outline a few times, then that's when you get to the strangers. And all of a sudden, you already know what you're doing. And it's all good. Most people find by party number 5 or 6, they're feeling really comfortable. And that we aren't really the center of attention at our parties. The products are. That when I'm talking about a product and someone's using the product, they're looking at the person using the product. They're not looking at it. And they go, oh yeah, that's right. So.
And again, it's all, aside from the fear of failure, it's just the fear of the unknown.
Right.
And I always like to point out, I was not born doing this. I did not enter this world knowing how to be a consultant any more than anyone enters the world knowing how to be a doctor or a librarian. It's you get trained and you learn it, and anyone can learn this. Anyone can do this.
So when you go to extend that invitation again to say,
yes.
So I could assure you that you are going to get all the training and support you need so that when you go into that room, you're going to have the outline and you're going to know exactly they start to finish. Do you feel like you could give the business a try, starting with family and friends?
And the other thing is, Karen and I are sitting here talking about what we say as, Karen's been a director for 18 years.
17 out of the 18.
17. I've been a director for 3 years, about 2.5 to 3 years. And we're giving you the words to say, I'm going to walk you through this and I'm going to be there with you. But as newer consultants looking to build a team and achieve directorship, you actually have something more powerful. You have my director or my trainer is part of a co-op. I have 6 or 7 trainers that I work with, and they'll be working with you.
Part of our program, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But those who are not a part of the co-op, I have an awesome trainer. And she's going to be working with you closely. The 2 of us will be, but, she trained me. She is training me because you guys are still pretty new. She's training me, and she's going to work with you too, and it'll be great. So don't think that you have to sit there and say to everybody, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, because you'll all hang up the phone and never dial in again. So, so just know that your director or the director team is behind you, which gives you something a little, you know, you don't have to take all of the ownership of that and then wonder how you're going to do that. You don't. You're gonna learn how to be a director just the way they're gonna learn how to be a consultant. So one of the other things is I don't have what it takes to stand in front of people and talk while I'm cooking.
That's sort of the same thing as public speaking.
Well, yes and no, because there are some people who really have this hesitation. When I'm using a knife, I can't talk. And I think people think that. And I was thinking today, you know, I would just look at this person and say, can you yell at your kids while you're cooking? If you can yell at your kids while you're cooking, you can talk while you're cooking. You know, if you can yell at the cat, yell at the dog, you know, whatever, you can, you know, and again, it's all about training. But you know, that is actually a hesitation I've heard, doing two things at once.
I think it makes it, you know, hearing a lot of these hesitations makes it really important that we have to think about making our parties very reproducible.
Yes.
We are doing all the talking, then people think if they sign up, they have to do all the talking. If we are doing all the chopping and slicing and dicing, then when people sign up, they think they have to do all the cooking. So the more we can delegate, the more we get our guests involved, sharing information, sharing page numbers and the prices and the uses, and more that people are using the products themselves, and we're just sort of narrating here and there, filling in the gaps, the easier it's going to look for someone looking at what we're doing.
Yeah, I like to think of myself more as a game show host. Just sort of keeping everything moving, but but not actually playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Those were all of the hesitations that were listed on the Facebook page. As we've been talking and doing this, do you guys have other things that you have thought of in the meantime that you would actually like to address individually? Have you all done your practice interviews or actual interviews?
I have an interview tomorrow and I signed 3 people.
Yay!
So yay!
So yay!
So Kristen, the person that you're interviewing tomorrow, what are you anticipating might be some of her hesitations or his hesitations?
It's a woman. Her name's Tiffany. She has 2 kids and she gets beat up at work a lot because she works in residential, which is something that I used to do, so I can relate to her on that level. But I think her issue is going to be the talking in front of people. Like, I kind of heard that from her, so that was covered. So I'm pretty excited to be able to address that because that's not something I dealt with at all.
She's afraid to talk in front of people, but she doesn't mind getting beaten up at work.
Well, she works with behavioral health people.
Right.
So
She has scratches all down her face. I'm like, honey, you need a new job. I'm like, I have one for you.
So Kristen, we did that interactive show at our meeting on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So present that to her as an option.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'm planning. I already talked to my host for this week, and I'm doing that.
That works really well.
Yeah, it was fun for me.
For someone who's very, very nervous about talking in front of people, I don't usually go into this much detail at an interview, but if it's a real fear, and assuring them that I'm going to train them and give them the words to say, and they're going to start with family and friends. If it's still a fear, I tell them, okay, I'm going to give you a 5-minute snippet of a little bit of the training that you get. If you can write down 3 questions and just read them over and over and over again, you can get through an entire party. The first question is, recipe reader, what's the first step or the next step in the recipe? And then question number 2 is, who's got the use and care card for that product? because, you know, they're going to take the cards that come with their kit products and hand them out to people in the room. And then who owns this product and wants to rave about it? And that's it. If they can remember those 3 questions, if they can write those 3 questions on an index card, they can get through an entire show. So they say, recipe reader, what do I do? And then the person who's the recipe reader reads the step of the recipe. And I say to the very shy person, where do you think everybody's looking at that point? And the person says, at the person reading the recipe card. And I go, exactly right. Then that person reads the step, they look at you, and they say, you know, you're going to take a cup of flour and put it in your batter bowl. Who's got the card for the batter bowl? Someone raises their hand and say, great, can you read the highlighted sections on there? And I ask the person who's feeling shy, where do you think all the eyes are on the room at that point? And they say, the person reading the use and care card. I said, exactly right. Then you have someone throw that cup of flour into the batter bowl for you, whoever's standing near the batter bowl, and you say, who owns the batter bowl and wants to rave about it? And all of a sudden people start sharing ideas about the batter bowl, and they're just bantering it around. They look back at you, and then you go, okay, recipe reader, what's the next step? And that's it. You get through an entire party, and you've hardly said a word. But all the information is out there. It's a fun, interactive party, and all you've said is those 3 questions over and over again. So I don't usually, like I said, I don't usually go into that much detail, but if it's a really big fear, I find by sharing that with them, and I say, that's just a little snippet of the training you're going to get. But, you know, so if I can assure you that you're going to get all the information you need, they're like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic, you know, so.
That's awesome.
And the other thing is, I don't know, you know, some of the cultures from the other teams that are on the call, but I like to be at people's grand openings. And that's another way sometimes to say, you know, just remember, you're not going to be alone there the first time. You know, I'm your net, I'm your safety net, I'm there with you, and, you know, we're going to do it together. And that helps also to allay people's fears of speaking, because they know that, well, they know they can't shut me up, so they won't have to say a word. But also that they're not going to be walking out there alone and feeling, you know, so exposed for the first time. But again, not everybody does a grand opening, and not everybody goes to a grand opening.
One hesitation that I find that I hear a lot, and I was surprised nobody mentioned it, was my husband.
My husband.
Anybody hear that?
I heard that when I called to confirm with Tiffany my interview for tomorrow, and I said, well, you should bring him along, and anybody else who has any kind of influence
right
in decision making, you should absolutely bring them along, because I'd love to answer their questions too. And she said, well, he can't come. I said, well, then you find out what his questions are, because I will answer them, and we can call him or he can call me. But I realize that he's a very important person in your life. Yeah. And he should have a say in the decision making, you know.
Excellent.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely have them come along, or if it's over the phone, have the spouse get on the other line. And again, the clarification, if you're in the interview and they go and you're at the end and they say, oh, I just don't think my husband want me doing this, again, ask for clarification, because I find it's one of 2 things. Either the husband thinks it's going to be a money pit, or the husband doesn't want to do the whole bed and bath routine in the evening and thinks they're going to be out 5 things a week. So I always say, well, tell me a little bit more about that. What do you think your husband will be hesitant about? So tell me more about that. So I get that clarified. And then I'll offer, you know, any kind of appropriate information. If the husband thinks it's going to be a money pit, you know, I let him know about PC dollars, and I let him know that, you know, they're really not going to have to spend any money except for the cost of the kit. If it's the watching the kids at night, you know, it's only a 2.5 to 3 hour shift. It's not 5 days a week. You can do some shows during the day. But I say, you know what, do you think you could say to your husband, honey, I just want to give this a try for 30 days. I just want to try out maybe 4 shows with family and friends. And you know what, how about if I assure you that I will spend no money on this business except for the cost of my kit, and at the end of 30 days, we'll sit down and we'll look together at it. We'll see, am I making money? Are there any hidden costs? Is this working for our family? And if we are not both, totally on board, I promise you, I'll stop. And I find that that has helped a lot of people sort of get their husband on board with, okay, you're not buying anything but the kit. We'll see how it goes in 30 days. Most of them have made way more money than they thought they would. And then the spouse is on board, so. But I was just surprised nobody had put that in the, on the.
Yeah, I was too. I actually was too, because I have heard that quite a bit.
How do you address the spouse thing?
Same thing. I ask, what do you think their hesitation is going to be? And then, well, who trained me, Karen? What do you think I say?
You say what I say, only funnier.
I say what you say, only my way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know, there are no extra costs. There are no hidden costs. You don't have to. Also, one of the things I've heard quite a bit was, I've done something like this before, and either they feel that it costs you. You know, there's something about Pampered Chef that it just intrigues them. Obviously, if they've done another direct sales before, it's and they stopped, and now they're looking at Pampered Chef. It's because they like Pampered Chef, but they're not crazy about the direct selling industry because of the past experience. My first question about that, you know, again, tell me a little bit about what happened or why you stopped doing the other one. And then my first, unless it's something, you know, a lot of times it has, you know, sometimes you have to have your own inventory and it was costing too much money, and you have to know what people are going to want, otherwise you're stuck with the product. Or I find that the number one reason people stopped was because of training. They didn't get the support that they were looking for, or they felt that they needed. And they're talking to us because they really like the idea of Pampered Chef, but a big red flag is, I don't want the same thing to happen again that happened last time. And so again, with all of the training that we do offer, I think it's kind of obvious what we could or would say. But again, the clarifying question of what you know, sort of what went wrong, why did you stop? And then once you find out why, many times it comes back to either extra costs or training and support. And we got that hands down over any other company that I'm aware of.
Yep.
Anybody else got anything? Now's the time. Can you think of any other objections, Karen?
I think that the biggest thing is sometimes people are just hesitant because they're fearful, and
Yeah.
so they're really ambiguous. They go, oh, I'm just not sure. And again, it's like, oh, you know, I understand. I know all you're really deciding at this point is, do you want to try out 4 shows to see if it could be for you? But I know it can feel like a big decision. But I want to make sure that I've given you all the information you need. So tell me a little bit more about what you're not sure about, because I want to make sure you've got all the information. So what exactly are you feeling like you're not sure about at this point? And then that's when they give it some thought, and that's when they usually voice that hesitation. Overcoming a hesitation or giving a solution or a potential solution is, once you've been around the block a few times, it's not that hard.
It's another tickler file.
Yeah, just like, you know, with bookings, you hear the same 3 things. The house is too small, I don't know enough people, and I don't know if I have enough time. Those are the 3 big hesitations we hear over and over again. Yeah, we hear some other things that are from left field. But those are the biggies that we hear 80% of the time. And if we have solutions for those, we will probably have plenty of bookings. Same thing with people who are considering the business. There's the same themes that we hear over and over again. But sometimes the biggest thing is just getting to the heart of the problem. When they say, oh, I'm just not sure. You know, well, I want to make sure I've given you all the information. So tell me what you're sure about. And then giving them time to sort of think and process and share. And I think that, you know, when we talked about the interview, those warm-up questions in the beginning, not only do those questions give us information that can help us with problem solving for their hesitations. But it also builds rapport, which I think is really important, because they need to trust us enough to tell us what their real fear is, because that, Anne Marie said it, it's usually a fear that is holding people back. So I think just, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. And getting to the real heart of the problem.
And the other thing is, couple of things. This just isn't the right time. It's just not the right time. Again, it's just knowing why it's not the right time, what's going on in their lives. But have faith, because out of the blue, I mean, we're going to keep in touch with these people anyway, whether they say yes or they say no, or whatever they say at the end of the interview and the end of all this. We're going to keep in touch with them. They're probably getting, if nothing else, they're getting our newsletter once a month. Our name is in front of them at least once a month. But you'd be surprised how many times you get an email or a text or a phone call and they say, okay, I'm ready.
I'm ready. Mm-hmm.
I'm ready now. And it's actually really great because you've already done all the work. You don't have to go back and interview them again. They just want to know what the sign-on bonus is for this month, and then you start getting their calendar ready and you start filling their calendar and getting them started. But even if they say no now, you'd be surprised how many people do actually get back in touch with us and say, okay, I told you a year ago it wasn't the right time. It's the right time now.
Yep. And remember the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 thing. A third
Yes.
of the people who take information home are actually going to talk to us again. A third of the people that talk to us are going to say, yes, now is the right time. How many people say yes is not a reflection on us. Okay, my goal when doing an interview is not, can I get this person to say yes?
Can I force them into taking this job?
Right. Our goal should be, I want to make sure they get all the information they need to make an informed decision. I want to make sure I've clarified, what anything that they need, so that I've given them that information. Now, if someone just says to me, I just don't feel like it's the right time, and I really feel like it's nothing but cold feet, I'll actually say to them, would you mind if I asked you a question? I mean, is now really not a good time because it's not a good time because you're way busier than you're going to be a few months or maybe a year from now? Or is now not a good time because now is now? And it's really scary to think about, it's not now. And you would be surprised how many people go, yeah, that's it. I'm just scared. And again, to say, you know what? How about we just take one step at a time and get your kickoff party scheduled, and we'll take it from there. We'll just take it one little baby step at a time, and you'll see it's not so scary.
And it could be not even a kickoff party. What do you say we just schedule a party?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's just schedule a party and take it from there. And usually in the course of planning their party, and working with them and host coaching, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, maybe I will make this my kickoff party.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah.
Okay. So did you guys find this helpful?
Yes.
Yes. One yes.
Yes, very helpful.
Good.
Good.
If you can think of any other things that maybe, again, this Facebook post is really good. If you have other things to add, what I would love is if you guys have more hesitations that you think of, to open it up to the group. And before I respond or Karen responds, I would love it if you guys would respond to each other and sort of brainstorm hesitations as they come up. I would love for this post to stay there for a few weeks, because you guys are going to be interviewing and you're working and you're going to be doing all that. We can leave this right where it is and just keep adding to it. But I would love to see you guys be doing the responding and the coaching and the brainstorming.
And is there a challenge that you came up with for them for this week? Because there's always a challenge.
You didn't tell me to.
All right, so then, how about
I'm sorry, I honestly didn't think of doing that.
Okay.
You have a good challenge for us, Karen?
How about conducting at least 2 interviews this week? either interviews with people that you meet at shows or people that you call up and I need to do a couple of practice things.
The practice, yes.
Yeah, and when you're doing a practice interview, you can tell the person ahead of time, throw me a couple of hesitations, because that's what I'm really trying to work around is helping people through the hesitations they might have. The other thing is when you're doing interviews, make sure you're talking to your director ahead of time and anticipating what some of the hesitations might be so you can kind of work through those with your director ahead of time. Then you go and conduct the interview. And again, if there's a hesitation that you just don't know what to do with, write it down, talk to your director afterwards, you can call the person back.
Cool.
Okay.
And on your practice interviews, you might want to talk to the person who's doing that and just say, if you were seriously thinking about doing something like this, what would be one of the things holding you back?
Ah, good.
And then all of a sudden they're coming up with something on their own that they might be thinking of. And who knows, by the end of that practice, you may have overcome their objections and you may be signing the person that you're practicing with.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. From Chris's, I've got to go to my, okay.
Yeah, we're done.
So
9:30.
this is it. So thank